Chairman, Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Nigel Smith, the Director of CBI, for his kind invitation to be here today. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to address you at a time when economic fortunes on both sides of the border are showing some positive signs of recovery. Our economies have gone through a major transformation over the last number of years, and we are finally starting to see signs of stability and growth. While no two economies are identical, there are many similarities between the causes of the crisis on both sides of the border. And in my view, there are also some common solutions evident in our recovery. I'd like to thank previous speakers for their kind remarks, and I was delighted to hear Joe O'Mahony referencing Groucho Marx. I thought for a minute he was going to reference his cousin as well, Karl Marx, who wouldn't go down as well in this audience. I think it's important to say something about what got our part of the country into the crisis it's in. A series of bad decisions were made. The banks got seriously impaired due to their lending policies, and it reached a point where it was impossible to access the funds which were necessary to continue to run the country and the markets. And the country had to turn to the lenders of last resort, and we're very grateful to have lenders of last resort who provided sufficient funds. And those lenders of last resort were the European institutions, the Commission and the European Central Bank in Frankfurt, and also the IMF. So, couldn't get money anywhere else. Well, where do you go? You go to the lenders of last resort. And of course, like all lenders, they impose conditions on the loans they provided. And the whole program is referred to as the bailout program, but the conditions of the bailout program, a lot of them were quite severe. There were a lot of them related to budgetary matters and running down deficits. For example, we have to get our deficit down to less than 3% by 2015, and we're well on the way to doing that. But there have been a whole lot of structural requirements as well. And we effectively had to restructure the economy, bring down the cost base, make it more competitive, restructure the labour market, and we have done all that now. In all, we have drawn down 91% of the resources available from our lenders, and we have implemented successfully 230 separate conditions of the bailout program. Now, it's worth reflecting on what happened, and we have many lessons to learn from what happened over the last number of years. Not least the devastating impact of the bursting of a property bubble and what effect that can have on families and on business. The negative link between the banks and the sovereign manifested itself very evidently on this island. In Belfast, as in Dublin, many families and businesses borrowed heavily to invest in residential and commercial property. People got drawn into the property market, and many small businesses who had a quite viable core business decided to do a property play as well. And it's the property portfolio that's dragging many SMEs down rather than their core business, which were quite viable. Now, I don't want to scapegoat either bankers or property developers, because we've had enough of that over the last couple of years. Every modern economy needs trustworthy bankers who will provide the credit lines that an economy needs. But also every economy needs a strong property and development sector. It's an absolutely essential element of a modern economy. But the principle should be that the sector should follow the prevailing economic conditions, not drive it, as was the case in the past decade. It went so daft down south that people believed they could all become wealthy by selling property to each other. And while property should go following economic progress, it shouldn't take the lead role, and that's the biggest problem. So the same families and businesses that got impaired during the boom are now struggling under the weight of debt. And in addition, many households and businesses are struggling to access the credit they need. As a result, we have a situation where thousands of families and businesses cannot fully engage in the economy. In the Republic, we have 100,000 personal residential mortgages which are impaired, and apart from the personal trauma that imposes on families, when so many people are effectively outside of the economy and struggling with debt, we need to get them back in. And, in addressing debt, arrangements have to be made by the banks to deal with impaired mortgages, and also the debt burden on SMEs has to be dealt with by the banks. So we are dealing with the legacy issues associated with this. And at a broader level, the bursting of the bubble has forced the government to introduce measures that it wouldn't have contemplated in normal times. Taxpayers were forced to put billions of euros or pounds into the bank, and we've large shareholdings now in the banks. The state owns 2 banks completely, and we have 15% of Bank of Ireland. Now the policy is to get the banks back to the private sector when the market is appropriate. So we have no policy intention of running state banks indefinitely. The policy is to sell the banks, re-privatise the banks, and use the proceeds to take down the level of national debt that we're incurring. I think it's appropriate that I should say a few words about NAMA. NAMA was designed to remove thousands of properties and development loans from the balance sheets of the Irish banks. And NAMA acquired over 70 billion worth of loans from the Irish banks, including about 3.25 billion of sterling loans linked to property in Northern Ireland. Given its size, NAMA is a key player in the property market, both north and south of the border. NAMA's strategy in Northern Ireland is aimed at generating sustainable activity and transactions in the Northern Ireland property market, both by adopting a phased and orderly approach to asset sales and through targeted initiatives such as vendor finance and joint ventures that are designed to overcome the lack of funding in the market more generally, and enhancing the future value of Northern Ireland assets through a programme of investment funding. While the primary objective of NAMA is to achieve the best financial return for the taxpayer from the assets entrusted to it, NAMA also has a social agenda. And I welcome that NAMA is working to deliver social housing in Northern Ireland where commercially this is feasible, and I note that recent decisions have been covered positively in the Belfast media. But nothing stands still, and the economy north and south is showing signs of growth again. And NAMA will respond to a growing economy. And if market conditions are right, they will increase the pace of disposal so that there is no brake put on growth by any inactivity in that sector. As well as reviewing the past and learning from the mistakes, we need a plan and a strategy for the future. During the economic downturn through which I have lived through a number of them, the solution always was to try and get back to where you were before the recession occurred. Now, there's a kind of a status quo ante solution. And the governments I was in, that was always the policy. Things go wrong, big effort to get back to where we were before things went wrong. That won't work anymore. Not in the way the economy is now. Because if you go back to where you were before the crisis started, you're in the middle of an unsustainable property bubble generating transactional taxes which are transitory and which will disappear out of the national accounts when the boom and bust finishes. So we must get away from the boom and bust model, and we must have a new business plan for our economies to ensure that there's sustainable long-term growth. And there's no mystery about what the conditions are for a sustainable economy. You must be competitive, because we're in a big wide world where people will only buy our goods and services if they're good value. So we must be competitive, we must get the cost base down. We must invest in what's necessary, and if you're looking at a checklist of what to invest in, education and skills, that's the big investment for modern industry. You need an educated labour force, you need a highly skilled labour force, and that means investing in the schools and in the colleges and in the universities, but it also means investing on those people unfortunate enough to be on the live register so that they can be upskilled and that they can be put in a position to get back to work again, because work is the great antidote for poverty, not welfare. So our plan that we have down south, you all have heard about the bailout programme, and I've referred to that. But in parallel, the government is running another economic plan, and that's that we're taking the economy sector by sector, and we're repairing the damaged sectors, and we're building on the sectors that are sound and thriving. For example, we were only 8 weeks in office when we cut the VAT rate on the tourist industry from 13.5% to 9%, and it was exactly the pump priming exercise that the tourist industry needed. The industry was on its back. It had dropped 30%. It was bad service and bad value, but we got it moving again. And we've had a very good tourist season now, and I'm delighted that Tourism Ireland, for example, is doing such an excellent job in drawing tourists to the island of Ireland. But that's the sector that we concentrated on, and it's going extremely well. I'd like to compliment Tourism Ireland, as I have done. I was in France on holidays this year, and my young French granddaughter bought a book for me in the local village. And it was a brochure as glossy as the National Geographic, and it was published by a group that are interested in the environment and in the landscapes. And the whole edition for August was dedicated to the island of Ireland, with beautiful colour pictures, north and south, everything from Bunratty Castle to the Giant's Causeway to this centre here, the Titanic Centre, down to the port in Dingle. And it was on free sale in the French shops, and whoever in Tourism Ireland twisted an arm to get that placed, they were doing an absolutely brilliant job for the tourist industry. Another area which is very strong with us is FDI, foreign direct investment. We've had a record year in 2012, and we're headed for a record year again in 2013. And I'm absolutely delighted that Invest Northern Ireland, which is putting Northern Ireland on the global stage for foreign direct investment, is being successful now. The IDA, which is our agency, often refers to the 3 T's when marketing Ireland as a destination for foreign multinationals: talent, track record, and tax. And I know the focus for many people here today is on the 3rd T, corporation tax. Like in the tourism sector, I'm of the view that by working together we can deliver real benefit. And that is why we fully support your application for a 12% corporation tax rate. And we have informed our friends in London of this. And you'll get absolutely no resistance from us as you campaign, because what you do in promoting Ireland abroad helps us as well when we in turn are promoting Ireland abroad as a location for foreign direct investment. SMEs have also featured prominently in Ireland's recovery. And the SMEs are the backbone of the economy. They're the great generators of employment, and of course they need credit. Targets for lending have been set by the main banks, and we are also exploring opportunities for non-bank finance. Ireland held the presidency of the European Union, as you probably know, during the first half of the year, and one of the areas we prioritised was the availability of credit, and especially non-bank credit. You see, if you look at the model in the United States, of which I'm a great admirer, and you compare it to the model in Europe, 75% of the credit that fuels the American economy comes from credit lines that don't come from the traditional banking system. Now, Europe is the exact opposite. Europe is over-reliant on the traditional banking system, and as the banks have reduced through deleveraging the overhang that they had, they don't have the capacity to lend. And the big threat to Europe now, including this island, is the lack of credit, the lack of liquidity. And we must look elsewhere. Now, during the course of the Irish presidency, we put this on the agenda. We got the Commission to prepare a policy paper on non-bank credit. And at the meeting in Dublin of finance ministers in the spring of this year, that paper was presented and a working party was set up, co-chaired by ourselves, to develop serious proposals from the European Commission on non-bank credit. And we'd be very happy to have your views, Simon, on that, and have an input on that, because you have the same problems as we have. We've made some small progress in it, and it's a good example of what I mean. Dell Computers are a big IT company. They have about 1,000 people in my constituency of Limerick, but they have another 1,500 in Dublin. And they applied for a banking license, the Irish Central Bank. And we had an occasion in Dublin yesterday where the Taoiseach and I presented the banking license to Dell as just a photo call. And their intention is, you're in business, you go to Dell, you ask them to put a new IT platform into your company. Not only will they provide you with the technical assistance that you need, but they'll finance it as well. And not only will they finance their own products, but they'll cross into sister companies and finance their products as well. Now, that's the kind of new source of credit that's important. And that's the kind of initiative that we need. And we're going to build right across our financial services industry to provide the necessary resources to grow the economy, which has started to grow. We've been growing, we're in our third year of growth now, but lack of credit could stop us. And lack of credit, particularly for small and medium-sized enterprises, could stop us. And I want to make sure that we address that issue. And as I say, we'd be delighted to work with your people here in the north to see if what we're doing can be of benefit to yourselves as well. While credit is the lifeblood of any economy, it's entrepreneurs and business owners, such as you're here in this room, who actually take the risks, and the risks must be supported. Now, we have extraordinarily talented young people, and they're coming out of our schools and universities all the time, and they're absolutely brilliant. But there's one problem with the way we have raised our young people. They see their future all the time as employees. And we need to get our talented young people to see their future as people who will found their own businesses. The whole entrepreneurial issue is an issue which must be addressed in Ireland. And I intend to address it in our part of the country in the next budget, because in the kind of world we are now facing, I don't think everybody should leave college with the expectation that someone else will provide them with a job for all of their lives. And, get the mentality of being an employee and someone else's responsibility to risk take. So we'll have to encourage more of our young people. And if you look at the statistics, the number of young entrepreneurs on this island is significantly lower than the number of young entrepreneurs that you get in any of the main European countries. So we must encourage people to start their own businesses. Listening to Joe O'Mahony, it struck me that if credit is the lifeblood of an economy, you don't get very far either without a strong energy supply. And I'm delighted that the Interconnector project is going ahead, and we fully support that in our government in Dublin, and we will hope that it's advanced without too much inhibition, because you need a talented workforce, you need credit and an easy supply of low-cost credit, but by God you need energy. And the way the world is going, energy is becoming a scarce enough resource, and we need the interconnector on a north-south basis. So I'm very pleased that things are going well. I'd like to congratulate you on this extraordinarily successful project here at the Titanic Centre. And apart from what has been flagged in all the media about its success and the throughput of visitors. It shows as well what a magnet investment can do to the surrounding area. And I'm conscious of the fact that it has been a driver of development in its immediate catchment area. And I think it's a good example of what good ideas, serious thinking, and focused investment can do. So thank you very much for having me here. I enjoyed it very much. I enjoyed the good company I have met since I came, and the nice people I'm talking to at my table. So thanks very much indeed.